Thank you, Jeff. I echo Tony's comments about, it was almost quite surprising to understand there's so much research around awe, and particularly in nature. And I have to admit, I spend at least 3 or 4 days a week going up to the adventure park, the mountains, on my bike with my son, riding each week. And often I find myself careering down a hill, stopping and looking out over the sunset, and now I actually realise there's research in behind the benefits associated with that. So I certainly appreciate the value in doing that, and I know I'll even more appreciate those moments now, having listened to the speakers, both Craig and David. A couple of things that I was certainly surprised by was the longevity of the impact, in terms of, particularly, with your research, Craig, those moments and the longevity of the impact over a period of time. And one of the questions, and I saw it come up in the chat, but I'd also love to get your insights in a moment, is around that whole dose versus longevity of impact. I think that would be really interesting to explore in terms of, well, how frequently should we be getting those doses? Equally so, I understand the importance of taking those moments out of our normal day and looking for those moments of awe. I guess one of the experiences that we have and the people that we work with is when they often start experiencing some of those stress indicators, they often miss the early indicators and then don't recognise these challenges until they start experiencing those severe indicators like social withdrawal or essentially energy levels are low. And I think the challenge we have is giving people the insight in terms of ensuring they're consistently doing it rather than waiting for that last moment when they're probably less motivated to go out into nature. So it's about obviously being very, very proactive as much as we can to incorporate those into our moments. I saw a number of people in the chat saying our workplace should do something. We should invest in our people going somewhere. But again, I think the challenge for us as people leaders is how do we encourage people to take ownership of that? How do we ensure that people take that ability and understand the importance of not only is it those holidays once a year or a few times a year, but how do we encourage them on an ongoing basis in order to prioritise this when we know that well-being often isn't the key driver for most of the people we're interacting with on a day-to-day basis. Not saying it's not important to them, but ultimately I don't think people are prioritising it, especially when they start experiencing some of those more negative indicators. So a couple of questions for you, Craig. One, certainly that dose versus impact, whether there's been any insight around that. Also, love for you to confirm the number of people in that study. I noticed someone asked that question. I think there was 124, but correct me if I'm wrong on that. And also, I'm also interested if you're aware of any organisations that are scheduling in moments of awe as part of their wellbeing strategy, particularly in nature. Great.
All right, thanks, Brad. Yeah, we'll start with the easy stuff first. So yeah, in the papers, 120 in the published paper. I think in total, we had 180 over 3 years, right? So that was all of the trips. I think 16 trips total. I personally went on 12 of them. But we had to pilot our procedures, make sure things were working. The whole GoPro thing, like we tried them on helmets first, we tried them on oars. So we had to fine tune all of that, which is why not all of those participants made it into the papers. Now, the question of dose is really important. I don't think anyone has looked at it, in a systematic way with a randomly controlled trial, which is really the gold standard for establishing this sort of things. So really the best we can do is kind of look at studies like mine, these experiences in nature, and kind of extrapolate. So I think our best guess is that every 3 to 6 weeks, people should try to have a bigger awe experience in nature, right? Whitewater rafting trip, maybe a weekend camping trip. And of course, between those, we encourage them to have awe in their daily lives, right? And part of that is kind of a mindfulness quality. And I don't mean kind of sitting and meditating like a monk, but just sort of noticing what's going on. in yourself, maybe catching those early signs of stress, like you mentioned, but also, what's new and beautiful in the world around you. Even being stuck in quarantine, me and my family for a year, there are things that you can notice if you pay attention that you can find really awe-inspiring. Maybe, watching your young toddler grow up a little bit over that time. And then the final question are there any organizations that have sort of implemented this? I think we're making incremental progress. So there's kind of a loosely affiliated group here in the US called Park Prescriptions. So these are doctors, MDs, who are sort of on board with the idea, like, we should be able to tell people, hey, I prescribe you, a 3-day camping trip, once a month. Now, I don't think there's any sort of systematic funding or support for this, but, just connecting people who are on board with this idea, I think is really important. And one doctor in particular, Nushin Razani, is in the Bay Area. She's an MD who works with kids. So she's been also doing this work, getting kids plugged into the outdoors as a way to sort of buffer them against, early life adversity. So it's not scaled up like I would want it to be. I mean, the dream is, you can get a prescription and, use a copay to buy hiking boots or a tent or something, and have, make it easier for people to access public lands. But I think we're making progress in that direction.